Weird.
Okay, well, this is really an exciting day for all of you guys because you're going to get to hear from Joseph Laboon over here, who is one of my favorite people in the whole world. Um, what can I say? I've been thinking a lot about what to say about Joseph. We lived together for 9 months during our SBS. Had lots of jokes, but one of the most amazing things I think about Joseph is he is really good at thinking deep and asking really good questions and really getting to the point in the heart of things. And I really love talking with him about things because he was always asking really good questions, wanting to know the answers. And so I really hope that today, as he goes through Ezra, you guys are able to yeah, go deep with the book, and Joseph will show you some of the amazing questions he's been thinking about, and just different ways that he's explored this book and the Bible as a whole. So before we start, I would like someone to pray for Joseph, if anybody would like to. All right, Kelly, you can go ahead.
Oh, I'm happy if Josh wants to. I saw he put his hand up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, how about Josh? Josh, you go.
Cool. Yeah, Jesus, I just pray for Joseph. I just pray, Father, that you just give him the words today. I just pray, God, that, I just thank you for the ideas, the thoughts, the process you've gone through on this journey. I just pray, God, that if there's something you want specifically to say today, I just pray that you would say it through him. I pray that you would touch our hearts, allow our hearts to be open, allow our hearts to hear what it is you want us to hear. In Jesus' name. Yeah, guide and direct these next 3 hours. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, Joseph, take it away.
All right. Yeah, it's actually funny that you say that because, um, or that they mentioned that thing about questions because I wanted to start this off with a question to. Wait, sorry. I can my my dad's here. Dad, can you wear headphones? I can hear the reverb from your computer. Okay. My dad's here, by the way. That's Mike Laboon. He just left, so I'll introduce him later. But what I wanted to start off by is by uh, like everyone going around and asking and like saying your name, um, and like one question that you've had. Could be like about anything. Could be like a BRI question, like when was Deuteronomy written, or like you know why does God kill people? Could be anything, you know. But just like a question that you've been thinking about that's been like on your mind, um, and yeah, I guess I'll start us off. I'm Joseph. I'm from Canada. And yeah, one question that I've been thinking a lot about is there's this thing that we'll kind of get into a little bit more in Ezra, but it's called Urim and Tumim. And I really don't, it's kind of, what does it actually do? What was its purpose? What is it? That's sort of been on my mind recently. Anyone else can take us off. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Armin. I'm from Norway. And the question was that name from question. My question is, what was the point of the exile and all of that if the people end up sinning again? Like, because it was to stop the sinning and kind of clean them, but if they fell into sin again, which I don't know if they do yet, but it seems like they do by the end of Ezra, so I'm like trying to see.
Good question.
My name is Noemi. And one question is like, some prophets, God protect them, and some he doesn't when they they share his words and they do things, but they get killed because of it. I'm like, why? Why would you do that? That's so terrible. So that's a question I have, but it's not on this book.
That's good.
My name is Kelly, and I think the question that I have is if the people had obeyed the law from the beginning, would Jesus have come back sooner? And would they have been able to like not live through a lot of the history that we've been reading?
Yeah, well, my name is Alex. I'm from Mexico, and I really don't have a question right now. Like I usually have questions, like lots of them, but right now I can't think of any.
Nice, praise God.
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm from America. Um, one of my questions was, it says like to put away their foreign wives and children in Ezra, and I was like, what does that mean to put away? Like, are they killing them? Are they leaving them? Yeah.
Good question. That's very very relevant to this book. I like it.
Hi, my name is Isabella. I'm from Austria, and I don't know if it's a question as much as it is something that I've been kind of like, what the heck about? And Ezra is also about the putting away of the foreign wives, which I mean, I think it is just separating from them, which in my opinion is so stupid because the Lord has so many laws about protecting the wives and the widows and the orphans and all that stuff. So I'm not very happy about that. So I'm wondering why they did that and if God wanted them to do that.
Well, is that everyone?
There's also staff members.
All right, yeah, hit us up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Ben. I'm from America. And a question I've been thinking about is everything Jesus says absolutely true?
Hey, I'm Simon. I'm from England. My semi-Ezra related question, but not really, is about how and why God prepares things before he does things. And specifically, my question is linked to the ministry of John the Baptist and what the heck that man was actually doing. But also, I think it connects a little bit with Ezra and was God making the people ready for the Messiah through this time period, or was it something different? And I'm gonna stay unmuted so that Liz can say hello.
I don't know if you can hear me from here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm Elizabeth, also from America. I have quite a few questions. The most recent one that I've been pondering has been, what is the day of the Lord and what is the significance of it through the prophetic books? So Joseph, I really hope you can answer that question during this teaching on it as well.
It's actually my main focus, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Michael, and I also have Miriam here with me. My question is, I don't know what. My question is, what is God doing? What is he doing? What is he doing with the future? Where's he going? Where are we going? I got so many questions. All right, Miriam, your turn.
Hi, Joseph. Good to see you. I don't have questions. I'm eating my lunch.
Your question could be, why are they disrupting me while I'm eating my lunch?
Yeah, you're distracting me.
Yeah, distracting you while you're eating your lunch.
It was great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Okay, so I introduced my dad to everyone else when he was away, but Mike Laboon is my father. He's gracing us in this Zoom meeting today. And yeah, Dad, do you have a question? Do you want to?
I do. I think I go right back to Ezra, what he's doing with the wives, which many people have talked about, right? Like, and because So did they get that right? If they get that right, why was that right? If they got it wrong, what does that say about how we interpret the Bible generally? Those are some of my questions.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. A lot of great questions. I'm going to disappoint a lot of you with my answers, which is exciting. Okay. Can you guys see this? Have I shared the PowerPoint? Nice. Okay. I'm using dual monitors, so I might have a little bit of a learning curve. I've never really done them before, but so yeah, this is Ezra. Can you see my cursor as well? Oh, beauty. Okay. Here's the book of Ezra. Yeah, I'm just going to get right into it. So, oh my gosh, things are messed up. As I was sort of preparing this book, well, actually, okay, what happened for me? I'll just share a little bit of what I did in this book. Is I started reading the book and I was like, you know what? Let's just sort of explore what like the little parts of this book relate to the rest of the Bible. So I would come across things like the Levites, and then I would just read about the Levites. I'd like go through all like the times it talks about the Levites, and I just read about it. And I sort of did that kind of thing with the whole book, and it ended up taking quite a while. But I found that like Ezra in particular is like super reliant on the other Old Testament books, which is perfect because you guys are coming from an incredible foundation of Old Testament books. So this will be really useful for you. I mean, you'll be like a natural at this. But I sort of did that, and I found it like super engaging, and that I sort of started to see Ezra in like a new light. And so that's what I'm kind of gonna try to do today. And so the thing with that is that I wanted to keep like the full quotes. I felt like it had like more weight to it than me summarizing it. So I have like quite a bit of quotes in here from like other Old Testament books. And I also I made a sign up sheet because I didn't want to read all of them. So if you guys do you guys know how to use the annotate feature? Okay, so what I want you to do is use the annotate feature, and you can sort of put your name beside one of the books here. And you can kind of choose which passage you want to read from. And you don't necessarily have to read if you like really don't want to. I can take over for you, but this is kind of like an opportunity for you to do work in this this thing. Yeah, so some of them are okay. Simon wants to do Isaiah. I only can see like the heart for a second after you put it on, but okay. Great. I'm gonna write this down so I can keep you accountable. Oh my God, your spelling. There's a text feature. You guys are fighting for Exodus. You got to figure that out. I'm gonna let you guys figure that out. Yeah. So some of them you do twice. Some of them you do once. Some of them are kind of like longer than the others, and I didn't really want to tell you which ones was which, so that it's kind of like a Kelly. Okay, we need one for Chronicles, Ezra, and Deuteronomy. I think. Yeah. Oh, nice. You're doing twice. I like it. Okay. Anyone want to do Chronicles? I guess I could do it, but it's kind of long.
I can do Chronicles.
Nice, Alex. All right. And I can do Deuteronomy. That's fine. Sweet. All right. Let's get, the dad, Michael. Nice. let's get into the BRI. Let me clear that. Gross. Okay, sweet. Yeah. So Ezra. Oh, authorship of the book. Okay, so a lot of people think. Oh, hello. Oh my gosh, something's happening. I think I'm still on the annotate feature. One second. Perfect. Okay, we're back. So I'll start with talking about authorship. So there's a lot of similarities between First and Second Chronicles. I don't know if you guys picked on that yet, but there's this one verse especially. If you compare the first paragraph to the last paragraph, or the first paragraph of Ezra to the last paragraph of Chronicles, they're pretty much the same thing. They're right beside the pages in your Bible, so to make it a little bit easier. They also have an incredible focus on temple priests, Levites, and worship, which is like in Chronicles. There's a weird amount of focus on Levites. It's mentioned like 100 times in Chronicles, where it's only mentioned twice, I think, in Samuel and once in Kings, and it's mentioned 60 times in Ezra and Nehemiah. So these books have a very big, like the same focus, same theology, and pretty similar writing. So there's the verse reference between the first and last verse, the proclamation of Cyrus, in case you're interested in looking that up. In Ezra, there's a bunch of first-person sections where Ezra says, "I did this. This is what I did. This is kind of what happened to us." So it leads a lot of scholars to believe that this is his memoirs, and so someone took his memoirs and they kind of compiled it into a book. But there's also third-person sections of the book as well. And so you kind of have to ask the question, if Ezra's the author of this, which is tradition, would Ezra write himself in keep his first-person memoirs, but then also write himself in third person? Does that make sense? Or maybe it's maybe a contemporary of Ezra who took his memoirs and they sort of they just kind of put filler in and put other things in. So you can get kind of different approaches where Ezra maybe wrote the first 6 chapters and then a compiler sort of took Ezra's memoirs and finished it, or maybe a compiler did the whole thing. Either way, we know that the timing of these books was around the time of Ezra, and it's very similar to Chronicles. So you can assume that the audience would also have read Chronicles and also would have read Nehemiah around that time. So the Babylonian Talmud says that Ezra is the author, but you guys know, whenever a historical document is always going to say that the main character wrote the book. So take that with a grain of salt. So there's a couple of dating views. Pretty much the first 6 chapters, you don't really have a choice. It says Cyrus, it says Darius. It makes it pretty straightforward to you. The only thing is that a couple of people have sort of fought over the last 3 chapters. In Ezra, I believe 7 verse 7, it says, "In the reign of Artaxerxes in the 7th year." And there's a couple of reasons why people haven't been super happy with that. One, there's 2 people in the biblical narrative named Artaxerxes who are king of Persia. So there's Artaxerxes I and Artaxerxes II. So the late view suggests that Artaxerxes II wrote the book, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first being that it's a more modern view. Yeah. So in this suggestion, Nehemiah comes in Artaxerxes 1, and Ezra comes years later in Artaxerxes 2, like about 50 years later. And there's a couple of things from the literary method that have led them to believe this. So it seems like the wall is in better shape in Ezra. There's like one verse where it talks about kind of like in Ezra, it kind of makes you feel like they're more organized and they're more prepared. So there's a couple of things like, oh yeah, they face the same issue, which you're gonna have to think about in Nehemiah. Not so much here. You can start thinking about it, like why would they have to do this twice? But there's a couple of things like they're more organized, the wall's in better shape. So it leads some scholars to believe Ezra came later. And because, like, if Ezra and Nehemiah face the same issue, why would they, like, I'll show you the timeline later, but the dates between them are pretty close. So why would they have the same issue in such a short time frame? Like, one of them must have not worked. There's a couple of problems with that. One thing, if you do sort of look at this date, I encourage you to check out these actual verse references, because when I was sort of researching, I checked them out and I'm like, well, these verse references, I understand what the scholars are saying, but I think their argument is kind of weak. Like the verses don't directly contradict each other. They kind of suggest, they suggest that the wall is in better shape in Ezra maybe than Nehemiah, but it doesn't like say anything that contradicts with the other version. So the traditional view is that Ezra came before Nehemiah in the reign of Artaxerxes I. So I think Ezra came in like the 7th year of Artaxerxes, and Nehemiah came in like the 30 he came in 445, so about 15 years later. There's the big thing about this is that Ezra and Nehemiah are together in Nehemiah 8. So like you can't really, you gotta, if you take the late view, you kind of figure a way around that. There's a middle view I want to talk about, well, quickly. So they're together in Nehemiah 8, which is, traditional sources all say that Ezra and Nehemiah are together. And both of the views kind of make sense because at the time there was a bunch of Egyptian revolts. So this is 460 is a couple years before this, and then 401 is a couple years before, I think 398 or something. So it makes sense for Artaxerxes to want to send Ezra back. That's sort of what scholars are looking at, is would it make sense for Artaxerxes to want to send someone to help the Jews, and this way Artaxerxes has an incentive. He wants to keep the Jews under control, and he doesn't want them to revolt, so he wants to make them happy. So both views make sense. The middle view is that in Ezra 7:7, when it says the 7th year of Artaxerxes, it's supposed to mean 37th. It's a typo, which I think is, it's okay. It's still, it just tries to solve the marriage issue. Let's talk a little bit about the language in Ezra. So Ezra is unique because it's one of two sections written in Aramaic. Does anyone remember the other section? Kind of a trivia question. One other section in the old, you would have done it already. Ben knows?
It's in the book of Daniel.
Was that? Sorry.
Daniel? Is it Daniel?
Yep, it's Daniel. You got it. That's worth 5 points, I think. You can add that to his grade, Simon. It's Daniel. Some scholars try to make the argument that the Aramaic is different, and so Ezra would have been written a later time. But from what we've seen, it's similar to the Elephantine Scrolls, which is kind of a Jewish community in Egypt, and they wrote to Jerusalem near the time of Ezra, asking for support for their temple. Yeah. So here's a couple of, I'm just going to go over the shifts in language, and they kind of very much make sense. So the first 4 chapters are in Hebrew, and they have very Hebrew themes. So Cyrus is sending the Jews back. They're building an altar. They're building the temple. All very Jewish, very Hebrew mindset. And then it switches to Aramaic for the letter to Artaxerxes, his response. All kind of these letters are in Aramaic, which makes sense because Aramaic was the I didn't mean to press that. Aramaic was the official language at the time. So it was standardized by Darius during his reign, but it's still commonly used in the biblical narrative for letters, and especially around that time. Yeah, and then it's back into Hebrew for the Passover, and again another very Jewish thing in the intro to Ezra, and then back into Aramaic from the letter to Artaxerxes to Ezra, and this makes sense because it would have been in Aramaic. And then finally, it's returned to Hebrew for, like, again, very Hebrew things, the genealogies, Levites, offering, and the rest of the book. So you got to understand that the original readers would have been very fluent in both. They would have it would have been natural for them for the reader to shift between Hebrew and Aramaic. Aramaic was kind of the English of the world. You kind of got to know it. You got to know it to like travel, you know. If you want to like talk to anyone, if you want to have like you want to be international, you got to know Aramaic. So Elizabeth asked for, I think you might have asked for some memes. I don't remember if it was you, but I searched up Ezra memes. I didn't want to do it, but I searched up Ezra memes and I couldn't find any. So I made my own. And yeah, I realized I didn't want to do it, but like I realized that no one would get these if I shared them with anyone else. So there are a couple of memes in my presentation. I'm so sorry. This is what happened when Ezra was trying to figure out what language he should write it in. Yeah. Okay. Ezra and Nehemiah. Okay, this one is interesting. So there's a strong argument for saying that Ezra and Nehemiah should be one book. In Hebrew, they're in one book, and historically, they've been referenced to being in one book. But then in the 3rd century, Origen, which is kind of like he's a church father, he decided that it should be 2 books, kind of like how 1st and 2nd Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Kings are 2 books. So he's first split up the books. Jerome decided to call them 2 Esdras, which is going to cause a great problem for us later on. The Jews took a lot longer to divide the books. They took until the 15th century. And yeah, there's probably the biggest argument for saying that there originally were 2 books was these repeated genealogies in 2nd Ezra and Nehemiah. It's pretty much the same genealogy. There's like a little bit of difference in like I think the numbers, but it's the same genealogy. So why if you write 2 books, why would you include the same genealogy twice? Is kind of the question you're gonna if you're thinking about this, you're gonna want to tackle. There's also a little bit of distinctions in writing styles. So Nehemiah includes the months typically in. Not sometimes. He occasionally does it in his book. So he says in the month of Nisan, or he uses these Babylonian months when he's describing the time of which things occurred. And then Ezra never does. So yeah, one thing I should mention is that some people think Ezra or Nehemiah 8 should be in the book. And Nehemiah 8 is interesting in that it's all about Ezra, and it's about Ezra reading the Bible to the people, which is the completion of kind of what his calling is. He has a heart for the Bible, so he wants to teach the Bible, and it would make sense for him to have like his whole story if he ends up teaching the Bible to the people in Ezra. And it's similar in writing styles, as it doesn't include the Babylonian months and amongst other Aramaic things. Okay. Ezra, there's a couple, I want to just quickly touch on the Apocrypha books. So the second Esdras, which, oh, look at that. Simon, can you give like I don't know if you know the book, but you did Nehemiah, so maybe if you could give like a sentence of like what the book's about, that'd be great.
The book of Ezra?
No, one Esdras. Or three, depends on...
Yeah. As far as I'm aware, one Esdras is Ezra, and two Esdras is Nehemiah.
All right, three Esdras then. Do you know?
Ben knows stuff about the...
All right, Ben, hit us up.
Oh, three Esdras.
What?
It's pretty similar to one Esdras, except there's this additional story about Zerubbabel, where he's in the king's palace, and there are these three guards, and they're like, what's the most like the worst thing for men, or something like that, or what's the biggest distraction for men? The king asks them that, and there are these two guys, and they give answers, and then Zerubbabel gives an answer. And the king's like, wow, Zerubbabel, that's a great answer. You can go back to Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Good job, Ben. Yeah. So it has a lot of Ezra, a lot of Nehemiah, a lot of Chronicle, and then one new story. So it's pretty much the same thing, except for this one story, which turns out is pretty much the exact same as a Persian folklore story, except for that it includes Yahweh in it. That's why a lot of people reject it, but it's quoted pretty widely, not in the Hebrew Bible, and Jerome rejected it, which is probably why everyone else did. The Orthodox accepted it. Oh, look at that. Written and scholars suggest it's written in the 2nd century BC. Ben, your job is to explain this one now.
All right. Two Esdras is like, it's kind of like the relationship between the stories in Daniel and the visions in Daniel. Two Esdras is like twice as whack as the book of Ezra. It's about Ezra has these visions. It's a very apocalyptic work. And so he has these visions of the end times, and it talks a lot about the destruction of the temple, and it uses a lot of whack imagery like Daniel does for that.
Boom. You got it. This one's even more rejected, and I'll show you a little graph that explains it. And it's written in the ADs. So I wanted to kind of explain to you the books in the most confusing way. So let me I gotta find it first. Okay, so Ezra, yeah. So the reason why Simon and I were a little bit confused is because Ezra is also called two Esdras by the LXX and one Esdras by the Vulgate. However, one Esdras is called one Esdras by the LXX, three Esdras by the Vulgate, and two Esdras in the Slavic texts. It gets worse. Two Esdras is called four Esdras by the Vulgate, three Esdras in Slavic, and in later Latin manuscripts, it's split into three books, 2, 4, and 5 Esdras. So here's a little graph, here's a little chart that sort of doesn't make any sense. And the reason why they split up these books like this is because originally it was thought to be one book. As you can see here, it's grouped into one book, one Ezra or two Esdras, and then they sort of decide to split it up. And and so some people split it up, some people didn't, because we know that the Jews split up later than the Christians. And then this one Esdras starts getting quoted a lot, so it's sort of connected to these books, and then so does two Esdras, but we don't know, are they different books, or are they the same books? How did they kind of relate to one another? And so then you get a lot of people doing a lot of different things. Following my next meme. This is kind of what the later Latin Masoretic texts decided to choose when they woke up. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about Flavius Josephus, just in case. Do you guys know a lot about him yet? I don't know if you've encountered him in your studies. No, a little bit. Okay. Yeah, so you're gonna hear a lot about him later on. He's gonna become more prominent, but he is a Jewish historian who wrote. He lived in about 100 AD. He talked about Jesus. He's like one of the only historians that mentions Jesus. That's sort of what he's famous for. He did a lot of writings from 100 BC to 100 AD. That's sort of like his primary history. He also talked about Ezra. He has a whole thing about pretty much all of Jewish history, and but he's not super reliable at this time. But he has like other information that sort of is an interesting sort of. It's like a different take to Ezra, so it adds like some more information. It takes him out. This is actually, fun fact, this is Dan Lewis's quote from an email he sent me. So very cool, Dan Lewis. There's a couple of differences in Josephus's account to the book of Ezra. One being is that he places Ezra 4 in the reign of Cambyses, and I'll talk a little bit about that in chapter 4, but that's sort of like a curveball. Why does he do this? Cambyses is never mentioned in the Old Testament, so we don't really know why. And he includes the tale of the three guardsmen, which is from Ezra, or Ezra's 1, or I guess Ezra's 3, or whatever you want to call it, or Ezra's 2. Yeah, so that's Flavius Josephus, and yeah, you're gonna kind of experience him more in a couple of weeks, probably. So Judah in this time is not Judah. It's actually this province called Yehud, and I don't know if it's a province. It's a territory from this is Persian territory, and yeah, so it includes Judah here. And what happened when Babylon attacked Judah years ago, months ago for you guys, is that they kind of destroyed a lot of Judah, but they kept the provinces, or the kind of the territories of Benjamin. They kept them more alive. So if you guys remember, Benjamin is my internet connect. Can you guys hear? My internet connection's unstable. How's it for you guys? Okay. Has it been okay the whole time, or just like right now?
It's a little choppy, but it's still easily to understand.
Okay. Let me know if it gets worse. I don't really know what I can do, but I can sympathize. I can talk slower, I guess. So yeah, they kept a bunch of the cities of.
I'll listen to the recording so it gets better.
Okay. Cool. My dad might hop out just so that it gets better. So they kept anyways, when Babylon attacked, they kept a bunch of the cities of Benjamin more intact, and so they made Mizpah the capital instead of Judah. So Mizpah's right here, and Mizpah is the capital, and then it remained the capital for the most of Ezra until Nehemiah in 445 BC, in which it returned to Jerusalem. And that's kind of when the walls were finally made, which makes sense. But right now, most of the population lives in pretty spread out in small unprotected villages, and they kind of they're getting attacked by sometimes the nations around them or the people around them kind of raid them a little bit, and kind of take some of their cities because they're pretty defenseless. Interestingly enough, the Persians always made the governors of this area Jewish. And you'll get like Nehemiah, very Jewish man. And it belongs to the satrapy Abar Nahara, or you might recognize from the story Beyond the River. And so beyond the river, oh, there's Mizpah. Beyond the river is, what it means is beyond the Euphrates River. So here we have a map, and in this map, everything is, you kind of get this is during Darius, so at the start of the book, we don't quite have Egypt, we don't have all of this yet, but it's divided into a bunch of satrapies, or it's actually pronounced, I forgot, but I'm pronouncing it wrong. I have it somewhere. But you have all the, yeah, so it's divided into about 20 of them, and beyond the river means beyond the Euphrates River. So everything to the other side of this river right here would be the province beyond the river. Besides, I think Egypt is its own. I've had like some sources kind of imply that Egypt was a part of it. Others seem to think it's different. I believe it. I think it's different. But yeah, so Syria right here would be the province beyond the river. So what they mean when they say province beyond the river is you have Judah, and then inside Judah, or sort of, it's like kind of like a state. So Yehud would be the state, and maybe Yehud would be the county, Syria would be the state, Persia would be the country. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. I'm not American, so I don't have counties, but I think that's how they work. And there's a circle around it. Let's talk about Jerusalem. Yeah, so the population is really, really small at this time. So some scholars think it's as low as, it's as low as 500 people. Some say it's more, about 1,500. So it's about 10% of what it was right before the fall of Nebuchadnezzar, or not the fall of Nebuchadnezzar, right before the fall of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. And the reason why they think it's so small is because of these Yehud stamps. So they stamp these clay jars, and they're called Yehud stamps. And so they kind of have the Yehud stamp on them so that you know where they're from. And they are concentrated in these sort of areas around. There's not a lot of them, and they're concentrated pretty away from the temple. So it's interesting because they chose to make, or they made the temple, and then they lived like kind of far away from it, like a weird kind of distance away from it. So it leads to questions like how much in use was the temple, and like why would they do this if the temple is part of their religion and part of what they believe? It's something to think about, and maybe it might sort of be why Ezra needed the Levites and the priests so much, is because the temple was in pretty disuse, and there wasn't a whole lot of Levitical activity happening. And the population grows quite a bit around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, and then quite a lot in the 5th century BC. And so here's a little example of what a Yehud stamp. See, there's a Y, A. I'm kidding. It's in Aramaic. I don't know. Different language. So let's talk about Ezra a little bit. When's our break time? Do you want to break like at the end of the hour, or when?
Yeah, we can either break like twice, kind of on the hours, and do 10 minutes each break roughly, or we can do one break at about 1/4 the next hour.
What do you guys prefer? Probably 2 breaks? 2, yeah, okay. Let's do 2 breaks. So I'll try to get through the BRI in the next 15 minutes. Ezra. A lot of this I'm going to go pretty fast through because you can pick it up within the first chapter of the book of Ezra in chapter 7. He knows a lot about the Torah. He has a heart for teaching the Bible, loves teaching it, the law. He has a lot of influence over Artaxerxes. Similar to Nehemiah, they're pretty high up there. So a lot of scholars think that he might be like a satrap or a commissioner of the affairs, or somewhere in the Persian court. I've sort of been convinced that he's not a high priest because there were kind of two high priests at the time. So in the first 6 chapters of the book, Jeshua is the high priest, and whoever is talking about Zechariah will talk about Jeshua a little bit more. But yeah, so he was the high priest during the first 6 chapters, and then this guy named Eliashib seems to be the high priest during the time of Nehemiah. So it is possible that Ezra was the high priest for a couple of years before Nehemiah came. So, but there's nothing in the text that indicates that it was, besides the fact that Ezra has a lot of authority and he seems to be in a position where he could be the high priest. You could argue that the reason why it doesn't say is because Ezra wanted to be humble and didn't want to put himself up there. The original readers, so again, Ezra, Chronicles, Nehemiah, all written at the same time. So when you're doing your charting, go into those books, sort of turn back to your Chronicles. I know you didn't chart it, but maybe this would be a good time to sort of, chart it, bring stuff from those books. I don't know why it says. Oh, okay. I just want to talk a little about Chronicles, just a little bit refresher. Chronicles goes through the kings of Judah and has an emphasis on the temples, the Levites, and the priests. And interestingly enough, David and Solomon are viewed as flawless in it. So there's no mention of Bathsheba, there's no mention of Solomon's many wives or his fall or his turn from God. So the author really wants to make a comparison to this time and say, like, this was Israel's golden age. This is what we are supposed to turn to. This is what we are, this is kind of what we're trying to get back again. And I have a couple of quotes from Chronicles, so I'm going to try to bring back sort of what parts of Chronicles maybe influenced Ezra quite a bit. So Chronicles, especially the first Chronicles with David and Solomon, is kind of what we want, what we're going for as returns from Persia. And they probably have access to most of the prophets at this point. Most of them have already spoken. There's, I think, a couple of them that we haven't got to yet, and a couple that are in this book. And lots of Jews at this time have sort of shifted from monotheism to polytheism. We have a record of this one Elephantine, this island in the Nile, and the Jews there have kind of went from being they worship other gods now. So they have a temple that kind of looks like Solomon's temple in the Nile, but there's also other temples right beside it, and there's shrines all around. And the Jews it's mainly just Jews who live in that island, so they have really kind of developed this polytheistic mindset, and that's kind of most of what we have about the Jews at that time that are not from the Bible, so extra biblical. And I just talked about that. So yeah, they would have been. I talked about this already. Okay, we're going to get to a couple of quotes. I think a lot of what the Jews would be struggling with is where is God at this time, and why is there like a couple of things that he seemed to have promised that he doesn't necessarily. It doesn't seem like he's delivered in, and he's come through on. So we're going to get a couple of quotes. I think there's three big things that the Jews have lost during this time of exile. The first being their land, and if I could get Genesis, whoever's on Genesis, to read that, that'd be great.
I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you through their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Genesis 17:6.
Sweet. Yeah, so it seems, I mean, you've read Deuteronomy, you know that this isn't necessarily, uh, you know that there's rules to this covenant, but like when you read Genesis, it definitely seems like God is giving this forever. I mean, as Christians, we might have different interpretations of this passage, but as Jews, it would have been pretty literal. We would have thought, okay, we're getting this land forever, and you see them return to the land, but they don't own it anymore. It's not really their land, and they're living on it, but they still have to pay taxes, and they're not their own people. So they have to sort of have this struggle. What is God lying to us? Like, what is he doing here? Why does he say this here, and why does he seem to have taken back his word? Their king. So could I get Chronicles, whoever's on that, Alex, if you could read that.
He shall build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. I will not take my steadfast love from him, as I took it from him who was before you, but I will confirm him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever.
Yeah. So again, the words forever appear. This one, it's not really part of the Deuteronomy that the king's going to be taken away from them. But yeah, so they would have assumed that this was a promise again, and they, the reason why maybe they kept so many genealogies because they wanted to keep track of who was heir to the throne and who was in the line of David, so that they could fulfill this. And I mean, they never do. They don't really have a king again. So again, the same sort of issues. God seems to be saying two things at once. And the temple. This was a really short one. Whoever got this, Isabella.
I have indeed built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever. 1 Kings.
This isn't really a promise by God. This is Solomon saying this. But this is interesting because this is like the one that was never promised. No, God never said, "I'm going to have a temple. You're going to have a temple forever." But here he is. Like, they have a chance to get this back. They have a chance to bring back something that they realized maybe was not forever, which I think is a little bit poetic. Okay, so that is my BRI. I think this would be a good place to end. I guess this is also BRI, but I think it's a little bit kind of like charting. So I think we should end or stop here and meet back at 2:03:03. Does that sound good? All right. Sick.
Right.
Cool. You guys are dismissed. I don't know what normally happens. You guys can go take a break.
Yeah. Everyone's back now, so I'll let you get back to Ezra.
Yeah, Joseph, you can start whenever you're ready.
Cheers, Michael. My dog joined me for now. She woke up. Her name is Chewy. Anyways, I'll get started. You guys can still see the screen, correct? Correct. Thumbs up. I like it. So the way I kind of organize this book is I kind of start talking about the kings as they appear in the storyline, with the exception of chapter 4, which is a whack chapter. But I'm gonna kind of talk about the kings and then go through the chapter and kind of do that that way. So we're gonna start off with Cyrus the Great, and yeah. What have you guys like? What do you guys know about Cyrus so far? If I could just hear some ideas, some questions.
One that let the people of Judah go back, and I think it was appreciated by his enemies because he was not mean, not so mean.
Yeah.
I remember, like in some class, that they were saying that people liked him generally because he would let people go back to their countries, like if from the people that were exiled into Persia, Babylon and everything.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much got it. He was a nice guy, and the Jews and the Babylonians they kind of they've all respected him. In their like their text, in the Bible it says good things about him. In the Babylonian text it says good things about him. Did I say bad things in the Jewish text? I meant good things. I don't know what I said. Yeah. Oh, and do you guys have any questions about the BRI that we've done so far? Any comments? No? Okay, I should mention that, like, if you have a question, just feel free to start talking, or you can use the raise your hand feature. I think I can see that. But yeah, feel free. Oh, Simon raised his hand. Yeah, I can see it. Perfect. I even get a notification, so it's very obvious for me. Great. I don't think I see the chat though, so don't use the chat. Okay, Cyrus. Let's get started. So he was the son of the Persian king Cambyses, not to be confused with Cambyses II, who is Cyrus's son. And he kind of started, his first achievement was to conquer Ecbatana. He started in about 553 BC, and and I quote, defeated vast medium hordes with his small army. Very impressive. So he just kind of started attacking people. It's kind of like there's a pretty lengthy story of why, but he just kind of kept on going. He just started attacking everything, and then by 539 he had everything except for Babylon. And it's quite interesting because he started attacking Babylon, and he saved it for last. But what he did was he captured everything minus the temple district. So he kept the temple district and the people living in there, like, he kept them alive, and they kind of continued with their regular living for 2 weeks, which is pretty short siege. But what ended up happening was they kind of gave up. After 2 weeks, he was welcomed into the city in the Babylonian festivals, and we don't really know why exactly they completely gave up, but from what we know about the Babylonians, they really respected him, and they really thought they thought he was a good guy. At least we have one record of it, which I'll talk about in a second, but it doesn't really say anything bad about him. So it's pretty dark on my screen, but this is the Cyrus cylinder. So it's in the British Museum, and it is basically kind of the story of Cyrus and him conquering Babylon. So what happened was Nabonidus was the king of Babylon at the time, and the Cyrus cylinder kind of explains how he desecrated the temples and how he looked down on the worship of Marduk. You guys remember Marduk? And in return, Marduk abandoned him, and he went off to search for someone a little bit more worthy. And guess who's more worthy? Cyrus. So he found Cyrus and was like, "Hey, Cyrus, I want to use you to restore the worship of myself in Babylon." So then Cyrus was like, "Okay, I'm going to conquer Babylon." I guess according to the scroll or the cylinder. So he conquered Babylon, and what it says is that he restored called sanctuaries, and he restored their temples, freeing them of their yoke of their old king. So it seems like the Babylonians didn't really respect Nabonidus, their old king, and instead that's maybe why they accepted. They thought Cyrus was so cool. It's because he kind of he really respected their religion, and he participated in their sort of their ceremonious offerings, and he declared himself the king of Babylon and Persia. So he was very connected to Babylon. He knew that they were powerful, and it's from my understanding that it's my belief, I guess, that he did this because he realized that in order to gain their trust and their respect, he needed to respect their religion. And so it also makes sense coming from a biblical perspective that that's what Cyrus would have done, is he would have seen these Jews, and they're very attached to their land, they're very attached to their temple and their king, but he's not going to give them a king. So what instead he did is he said, yeah, you guys can go back. This they're going to love me. They're going to really respect me, kind of like how Babylon respect me. And yeah, he's very pro Yahweh, very pro Marduk. So he knew how to gain his subjugates' trust, and it worked. He didn't have rebellions from Babylon or the Jews. Here's sort of a quote from Josephus. He wrote his book Antiquities of the Jews, which is the history of the Jews, and he writes about Cyrus, and I think it's kind of cool what he says about it. He talks about how, well, I'm gonna let whoever's turn it is read it. I think Ben, you're up.
Nice. Thus saith Cyrus the king, since God Almighty hath appointed me to be king of the habitable earth, I believe that he is that God which the nation of the Israelites worship. For indeed he foretold my name by the prophets, and that I should build him a house at Jerusalem in the country of Judea. This was foretold by Isaiah 140 years before the temple was demolished. Accordingly, when Cyrus read this and admired the divine power, an earnest desire and ambition seized upon him to fulfill what was so written.
Yeah, so oh man, I'm at a loss because I don't know if this was written 100 AD. So like, what are the odds Flavius Josephus like knew that Cyrus admired the divine power of God when he read like the scroll of Isaiah? Like, what are the I don't actually. It'd be so cool if that happened, and I think it could have happened. I mean, they're like Jewish people in pretty high positions. Daniel could have been that man. He was very close contact with the kings around that time. So I mean, it would be so cool if Daniel gave Cyrus the scroll of Isaiah, and Cyrus read it, and he was like, "Holy crap, my name's in this book," and he sends the Jews home. And either way, I think it's really cool. Just what happened either way. We're gonna read now what Isaiah says about Cyrus. This is a long one, so whoever's on Isaiah, sorry, Simon. You're up, so you can read this. Yeah, actually, if I'm just gonna get you to read the who statements, so this is the lines that start with who, and then
Not
the last
the verses in between.
Yeah, just the who verses, and then the last from Cyrus onwards.
Okay. Who formed you from the womb? Who alone stretched out the heavens? Who spread out the earth by himself? Who frustrates the signs of liars? Who turns wise men back? Who confirms the word of his servant? Who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited? Who says to the deep, be dry? Who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose, saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple your foundation shall be laid.
Sweet, thanks. Yeah, so this is cool to me because it kind of it shows all of these incredible things that God does. Like he makes you from the womb. He does all these great things. He's made the heavens. You know, he does all these cool things, and then it ends with talking about Cyrus, and he's saying like, I've done all these crazy things, and not necessarily that this is better, but this is the end. So like it's important, and it's a big thing, and it's that God is saying to Cyrus like, you're going to do my will, and you are my shepherd. It's a weird thing to say, you're my shepherd. And so this is definitely God's will, and it's definitely part of God's plan, Cyrus. And so I think it's important to, when you're considering Cyrus's motivations, is that God definitely had his hand in this. You know, you can't say Cyrus. I would argue that it's not just Cyrus, not just like Cyrus's motivations politically, but it's God's way of sort of bringing his promises to the Jews. And yeah, something to think about when you're charting. So yeah, let's just get into the book. Okay, yeah. So again, verses 1-4 is the same, or 1-4 is the same as the last chapter of Chronicles. And so Cyrus uses the phrase "the Lord God of heaven," and the word he uses is Yehovah, which means self-existent, eternal, Jehovah, the Jewish national name of God. And no other king really in the biblical narrative accepts Yahweh so easily as Cyrus does. You can go back to the stories of Daniel, go see Darius, and see what the words that they use to describe God. It's pretty much consistent with the God of heaven, which just means the God of heaven. That's all it means. It's just referring to like the God who is the God in heaven. It's nothing specific to Yahweh or Jehovah or anything. And so Cyrus actually he's declaring the identity of Yahweh, which really it's pretty common for, like, everyone's polytheistic, so all the other religions would accept Yahweh, that he's a god. But Cyrus uses his real name, which is pretty unique. Nebuchadnezzar does use, I don't know if I have it. No, he doesn't. I don't. But he uses supreme God, but he only does that after like the whole fiery furnace. So Nebuchadnezzar has this whole storyline of what it takes for him to recognize Yahweh. And Cyrus doesn't need any of that. He uses the Lord God of heaven right away. Something I think is cool is that is this verse 5, God starts stirring the hearts of the Jews, and he says, everyone whose spirit of God was stirred. And it doesn't really say what stirred it or how it was stirred, but it seems like God is working in the hearts of the Jews at this time. And it's kind of perfect to when God's stirring in their hearts. And imagine what would happen if God started stirring in their hearts 40 years ago to go to Jerusalem, and they still had like 40 years of waiting in captivity. It really speaks to like who God is. And I think a lot of times, like in life, I am pretty impatient. I want God to do things right away. And this is kind of it's a testament to like God moving at the right time. And it's really kind of challenged me to like, what am I asking God for? And like, how much more does God know than me? The Jews are giving up a lot at this time. There's these, they appear on tablets as being like tax collectors, agents, witnesses, royal officials. Like people like Daniel would be in really high places. And then you get Ezra and Nehemiah, also really high positions. They give up a lot to go to Jerusalem. And as I've sort of talked about before, there's not a whole lot of people that came. Only about 40,000 people end up coming to Jerusalem. So it's a hard thing to do, and it's definitely not easy for them. Josephus says many remained in Babylon, being unwilling to leave their possessions. One thing I should mention for the quote things, I'll read all the quotes if it's like on like a small quote. If it's the whole page is just one quote and there's like usually a background, then that's like the ones you guys read. But these small ones I can do. Don't worry. Yeah. So the people who came gave up a lot, and they sort of accepted a life of poverty, and they had to give up their old jobs and likely they chose a much harder life. Kind of cool, a little bit of a connection to the Exodus is that they leave their captors with gold again. And this time it's given directly from the king. Here's a little reference for you guys. But yeah, it really speaks to like God's provision when he's sending his people out. He's sending them with stuff. He's not leaving them empty. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have noticed, but Sheshbazzar appears in the first chapter of the book, but he doesn't appear in the rest of it. There's one time he's mentioned, but that's only referring to him in the past tense as he brought the things back to, he brought the temples or the treasures back to Jerusalem. But Sheshbazzar isn't really much of a character, and instead this other guy named Zerubbabel kind of takes the stage. So it leads people to sort of like question like, why aren't they ever together, and why do they seem to have the exact same role? And so there's two trains of thoughts, either that they might be the same person, and one of them is just the Aramaic or Hebrew version, or that Sheshbazzar dies early on and Zerubbabel takes his place. That's all. Yeah, chapter 2 is pretty short, but it's a good one. Yeah, so what's interesting about this genealogy is that this genealogy is pretty much all of chapter 2. But it appears 3 times throughout the Bible. This same genealogy appears in Nehemiah 8, Nehemiah 7, and 1 Esdras 2. So it's very important. It's sort of the return of the Jewish identity and the Jewish people. So yeah, I mean, it's weird because there's not a whole lot of genealogies that are repeated 3 times. This one's important. It mentions the priests. It mentions the Levites. Is very focused on the temple worship. So not a lot of like who is of the line of Judah, who's the line of David, but very priestly orientated, very very religious. Yeah, and one thing I want to mention about verse 2, maybe I have it. Oh yeah, okay, I do. So it's a list of leaders. There's 11 of them if you count in verse 2. It talks about Zerubbabel, Jeshua, Nehemiah. A lot of people think that there's actually 12 leaders because it makes more sense, being that there's usually 12 tribes of Israel. So there'd be 12 leaders, but there's only 2 mentioned. Also, you might count Sheshbazzar, which would be the 12th as well. And then verse 38 to 58 is focusing on the temple in a way that is pretty uncommon for genealogies. And then I have a couple of questions that you guys probably don't have the answers to, but the temple servants, it's not mentioned. The numbers aren't mentioned for the temple servants or the Solomon's servants. Why aren't they mentioned? They're clearly important because there's a whole other paragraph, and it's like a kind of an odd thing to have for just them. But there's 42,000 people that return. So scholars estimate that there's 2 to 3 million Jews alive at this point. So not like a whole lot of them actually returned. A lot of them probably were polytheistic. A lot of them probably stayed. And we'll get this isn't the only return. So we'll get a couple of more. We'll get one with Ezra, a big one with Ezra, a big one with Nehemiah, and there's probably a bunch of them in the middle as well. Okay, so in 63, it talks about how there's a couple people that were unregistered from the priesthood who said they were priests, but they weren't included in the priesthood, and this is kind of the Jews' emphasis on keeping them pure and keeping their religion strong. There's a big theme of exclusivity in this. So you'll get that with the last chapter. This is I think this one is definitely more reasonable. People could just lie about it. They don't exempt them forever. They said they have this weird sort of reference sort of at the end of that paragraph 63 that they're waiting until a priest could consult Urim and Thummim or Tumim, and I don't know if you guys remember, but it's been mentioned a couple of times in the Bible so far. But do you guys like have any idea of what that is? Yeah, go ahead.
I remember it was, I think, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, maybe. I think it's like a casting of lots kind of a thing that the priests would do to like find out the will of Yahweh about certain things only, though. But what exactly it is, no, I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it's in the thing you're talking about is in Numbers. Well, we'll see it in a second. But yeah, you pretty much got it. We're going to talk about it a little bit more in a second. One thing that's they're given this amount of gold, 60,000 darics and 500 minas. This equals 500 kilograms of gold and 3,000 kilograms of silver, which seems like a lot, but it really isn't when you compare it to Solomon's amount of gold. So Solomon, it doesn't say how much gold he spends in the temple, but it kind of says like he everything's kind of in gold. It does say the amount of gold though that he spends on the Holy of Holies, which is a 9-meter cubed room. And he spends 20,000 kilograms of fine gold on this one room. And no one ever is going to see this room, like except for the high priest once a year. But he wants to brag about it. He wants to be like, yeah, I did this. This is like a cool thing I did for God. But he spends 40 more times of gold on this one room than all the Jews are given for their temple. And just for like, it doesn't even say that this was just for their temple, but it says in total. Like, so like they're pretty poor. They're not rich at all. This is not a whole lot of gold for the whole nation and for their temple. They are given more. They're given more in Ezra. That's after the temple. And they're probably given, or sorry, in Ezra 7, the whole book is Ezra. They're given more during the time of Ezra, a couple years later, after the temple's made. But right now, not a whole lot of gold for their temple, for their worship. Okay, Urim and Tumim, which some Jewish guy said was how you pronounce it, so I trust him. There's 3 main verses that sort of describe what these things are, and they're pretty obscure. Urim means light, and Tumim means perfection. So this one in Exodus. Oh, Exodus. I'm getting it. Oh, this is when I normally wake up. My alarm just went off. So in Exodus, it's what happened is talking about the breastplate Aaron would wear, and it's saying in the breastplate of judgment you shall put the Urim and the Tumim. and they shall be on Aaron's heart when he goes in before the Lord. Thus Aaron shall bear the judgment of the people of Israel on his heart before the Lord regularly. So we know that the breastplate has this sort of all these stones, and there's 12 of them, 4 by 3, and Urim and Thummim are supposed to be on it above his heart. So we don't really know. It doesn't really explain where it goes. Some people think it's like a satchel. Some people like a little bag sort of above his heart right here. Some people think that it's somehow like attached. It's like it's separately attached. And in Numbers, yeah, okay. Joshua, Moses sort of commands Joshua to stand before Eleazar, and who's going to inquire by him, by Urim before the Lord. So it seems to be this thing where you can sort of talk to God through. And this is confirmed in Samuel, when, if you guys remember, that one story where Jonathan eats honey, and Solomon's like, I'm going to kill whoever ate honey. And then he finds out it's Jonathan. So how he finds out is he consults Urim and Thummim again. And so it seems to be this thing where you ask God and he somehow gives an answer. It's not very clear how, although there's a couple of extra biblical ideas of how. Josephus says that it's a mix of sardonyx, and it shines when Yahweh is present, or maybe he also says that when he's present at their sacrifices, or if they're victorious in battle, it would glow. He also says it stopped working 100 BC because God was sick of the Jews' transgressions. The Talmud says something else. It says that it contains all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the tribes of Israel, which make up all the letters. And the letters can be rearranged to spell something, or maybe the Talmud kind of works that it's like two Jewish guys kind of talking to each other, and they share like different ideas, and they sometimes contradict each other. So sometimes they rearrange to spell a word, or sometimes like ones will glow to spell a word that sort of will give you an answer. And I believe that the Mormons used it, or they used it to translate their Bible. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. Moving on to chapter 3. Does anyone have any questions as of yet? No? Cool. Okay, so Jeshua was the high priest. He's sort of the main priest in this scenario. He is addressed as the high priest in Haggai and Zechariah. So if you don't believe me now, just you wait. So fear on them because of the peoples of the land. So the idea behind this is that the people of the land have sinned, and they want to make sure that they're atoned for. And so I pretty much just say it there. So they reinstated bi-daily offerings. I don't know if bi-daily is a word, but it is now. What this is in Numbers 28, they're supposed to offer one lamb in the evening and one lamb in the morning. So they haven't been doing this for 70 years. That's a lot of saved lambs. 7 years without atoning for sin. And the timeline's a little bit interesting because the Cyrus's proclamation and the destruction of Jerusalem doesn't actually equal 70 years. So there's a little bit of you got to kind of, maybe it was when the temple was completed, but maybe it was when there was a bunch of deportations in Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. So when does the 70 years actually make sense? But you hear Jeremiah say 70 years. So that's where we get 70 years from. And Ben, I was wondering if you could figure out how many lambs exactly they saved during these. So 70 times 365 times 2. That'd be great if you could just do that. And then there's in verse 4 they start talking about Jewish festivals, which is something I think you should pick up on, is that it mentions most Jewish festivals. It talks about them quite often, and it's something that helps them reinstate their culture and reinstate who they are as a people. And in verse 6, it just basically says the exact day of when they start offerings again, because it's so important to them. Okay. This altar I wanted to spend a little bit more time on because I think it's so important. And I think it kind of this brings this is brought to light when it's looked at from the rest of the Bible. So chapter 3, or the first part's about building the altar, and there's an interesting commandment in Leviticus where it says, "The fire shall be burnt continually; it shall not go out." So this is kind of the first time you hear of the idea of an eternal fire. So this fire symbolizes eternal worship, and I think I have and it's not uncommon at the time. In Persia, there were 3 kind of great fires, and they'd be these eternal fires that were always being like symbolizing. They're like these priests that had dedicated jobs to keep these fires going, and they symbolize unending worship to their gods. So it was a thing happening at the time, and the Jews sort of had this thing that they did from Leviticus. It doesn't really say how they transported the fire with the tabernacle. Like, did they like get a torch, go and light up the torch, and then carry it on a stick until the tabernacle was down again, which they like lit it up, since it's an eternal fire. But we do get these couple verses, which in Leviticus, where they see the fire coming out from God, coming out from the heavens, and it consumes the burnt offering, consumes the fat, and all the people worship because of it. And so here you have an eternal fire that was never lit by human hands. This was lit by God. And then again, in Chronicles, Solomon finishes his prayer of dedication. Again, fire from God coming down to the altar. It like a second time. It's never. Maybe it's this, I don't know, maybe they accidentally unlit the fire when they built the temple, or maybe it was, we don't know, but either way, both times we get fire from God. And so, why not this time is my question. I think they would have been asking that. Looking at history, they would have seen twice in a row, God without fail comes down from the heavens and has this incredible sign. And so, and there's no explanation. It doesn't mention why. It doesn't say anything about it. But I think it's something to note, is that this would have been a disappointment for them for sure. This would be like a sign that God was with them, and instead they have to light it with their own hands. And I don't know. I was kind of wondering how long were they waiting before they lit it. Just kind of sitting okay, and then we can wait a couple hours, okay. And how they respond, I think, is also really cool. And they kind of rebuild the temple foundations, but they have this one line, and it gets me. They say, "For he is good, and his steadfast love endures forever," in verse 11 there. This line is really short, and a lot of the time when you get these praise things in the biblical narrative, they're quite long. This one is a line long, and it's pretty simple. It's pretty standard, but I don't know. I think that sometimes when you have something really short and really simple, it forces the few words to say to mean something that explains everything. So you have as it kind of goes on to explain what people were feeling later on, but some of them were really happy that the temple was built, a lot of them were really disappointed in God. But here you see that both of them, no matter from what they're like, the really old guys, the really young guys who were really stoked about it, they all respond in the same way. And I think you can only respond in the same way if you know who God is, and if you really know that He's good, and that His steadfast love endures forever. And you only can really know this if you know who God is. And yeah, I think that it's kind of important to know that if life sucks, if life's kind of a disappointment, if something doesn't work out the same way, that it's important to know that God is good and that His steadfast love endures forever. And if life's going great and God's blessing you, it's also important. And so you have both of these people in kind of both boats, and they both are like praising God. Yeah, so personally, I've sort of, oh man, look at this, same thing. Okay. Personally, I've sort of tried incorporating this in my life. I think it's kind of fun, but like whenever I'm having a bad day, I just kind of like go to myself like, yeah, for God, you're still good, and your steadfast love endures forever. And it's weird. Sometimes I have like these sort of like these weird shifts in my mood where I'm like, okay, like this is okay. Like I got this. It's been a hard day at school. Like God's still good and He still loves me. Josephus comments on this and what the Jewish people thought. And so he says they saw kind of how inferior the temple was, and they sort of considered how much their happy state sunk below of what it has been as old, as well as their temple. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why the temple was so disappointing when we get to the dedication of the temple. Okay. So, now we're moving on to chapter 4. The 4, as I've hinted at before, is a pretty weird chapter. There's the first 6 verses are about these Samaritans who live in the land and how they want to help the Jews help them work. And so 4 verse 2 is referencing one of the 3 major colonizations of the cities. One of them is in Kings, and this is the one we sort of have records for. It's Shalmaneser. So he sent the people to the land of Israel. And the Samaritans, if you guys don't know, they're the people living north of Judah, so where Israel used to live. And Shalmaneser, he sends people from Babylon, all these places I'm not going to try to pronounce, and he sends them into the land, and they didn't fear the Lord, so God kind of sent lions. And then the king of Syria sent an Israelite priest to show them how to fear the Lord so that they'd stop dying. And they kind of listened to him, but they also kind of like continued in their old way of worship. So this was how the Assyrians would have lived, is they would have lived in a constant state of worshiping God, but worshiping the other people. So that's why they were so is why Zerubbabel didn't want them to help, is because yes, they worship God, but also they worship a lot of other gods. And then we get Sargon and Esarhaddon bringing more people later. So there's a bunch of people, and I've talked about that. Okay. Letter to King Artaxerxes. One thing I should mention about this letter is it's not really regarding the temple anymore. It's sort of a break from that narrative, and this whole chapter is really not about the temple. It's sort of it's a summary chapter of all the persecutions that happened to the Jews, just in general. So sometimes it's bribery, sometimes it's them literally being commanded to stop working. it's different things, but this one happens during the time of King Artaxerxes, which, if you've caught, is a weird thing because King Artaxerxes doesn't live right now. None. Actually, this is a summary statement. So, then it goes back into Darius, Darius was before Artaxerxes. In verse 10, it's talking about another deportation from a guy named O Snapper, which I think is such a cool name. But apparently he just Ashurbanipal, so disappointing, which is the son of Hadon, which was the guy mentioned just in the last slide as bringing other deportation to Judah. Okay. Yeah. So one thing that is a theme in this book is that there's a bunch of persecutions that usually happen at the start of a king's reign. So there's usually a lot of things that happen at the start of a king's reign. So at the start of King Cyrus's reign, he sends the Jews back. In verse 6, it talks about how at Ahasuerus they write an accusation. This is because they write an accusation against the Jews. This is because at the start of a king's reign, usually not all the rules apply anymore. So a new king, new rules. So that's why usually sometimes there'll be a lot of revolts at the start of a king's reign, a lot of changes in rules. So for this one, I wanted to share with you guys something that I think helps a little bit more. I've kind of made a timeline here. You guys can see that, right? Yes. Okay. I'm going to try to move it to a different window. See if you guys can still... Oh, it doesn't like that. Okay. So this is a timeline I've made of the story of Ezra in the biblical narrative. It also has Nehemiah right at the end, but it basically helps explain chapter 4 and the timeline of it. So right now what we've done is we've gone through Cyrus's proclamation to the Jews, and that's been the last 4 chapters. And then we get in verse 4 and 5, here we get the adversaries bribing counselors, and that happens for a while. So it happens the reign of Cyrus, the reign of Cambyses, until the 2nd year of King Darius. And then we jump. This is the end of chapter 4, this is chapter 6. We jump all the way to Ahasuerus, which is actually Xerxes. And I'm going to call him Xerxes because I find it easier to pronounce. But this accusation happens here, and we never hear anything else about it. This is the time of Esther as well. And then we finish off the chapter with Artaxerxes. And I find it really interesting. I've spent a lot of time on this chapter trying to figure out why Artaxerxes is here when he's still a king here. But I think what I've gathered is that what happens is that Artaxerxes actually, this segment is a shift from the temple narrative and just supposed to talk about general accusations. That's what all of these things are about, and that's what it's finishing off, is just general you can't work, where the rest of the book focuses on the temple. So then we get the end of chapter 4 about the temple completing, and Ezra being sent to help like the priests and the Levites. And then Nehemiah kind of picks up on what happened to the wall, and sort of a finishing statement to this end of chapter 4 when Artaxerxes commands the building to stop. And so you got to kind of deal with Artaxerxes' mixed motives. Why is he doing one thing one day and another thing the other day? Like he's sending 2 people to help the temple. I think something that makes sense to me is that maybe he just wanted he wanted to send people he trusts to help build the temple. And here he didn't really know anyone in Judah. He didn't know if a rebellion is going to happen. We're going to talk more about that in chapter. I guess this is the chapter we talk about it. He didn't want a rebellion to happen, so he starts off by saying, look, I'm stopping all of this. And then he's like, okay, I'll send Ezra. Okay, I'll send Nehemiah. I trust them both. I mean, I know them because I've lived with them, kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to stop my share for a second and then resume. So I'll give Simon that PowerPoint so that you guys can have it forever, or he can decide if you guys get it, I guess. This is just a summary of kind of what I just said and their dates for easy reference. Another meme. Artaxerxes' indecisiveness. I don't know if you can read that. All right. Okay, Cambyses, I'm going to skim over because he's never mentioned in the biblical narrative. But a couple things important is that he's the son of Cyrus, so he's an heir. He conquered Egypt. That's kind of the thing he did, the thing he's known for. Egypt is a hard place to conquer. That's enough for his life. And he kind of embraced the same embracing of cultures that Cyrus did. So he took part in Egyptian ceremonies and Babylon ceremonies. Egypt, however, they, I guess, were fine with it this time, but you'll see constantly that they do not like being under a nation, and they cause a lot of trouble. So here's a map you've already seen, I think, once, but I basically drew just a description of what Cambyses did. And I'm keeping the map consistent throughout my presentation, just so that it's easier to visualize what they did. But this is during Darius, remember? So in my last slide, they didn't have Egypt, but now they do. And you'll kind of start to see that we encounter Greece and the Scythians a little bit more, and they kind of cause a lot of problems later on. Okay, so now Darius is a big figure in this book, and he's important because he's actually not an heir to the throne. What happens is a guy named Smyrna captures the throne, and we don't really know who he is. People think he pretended to be a brother. Either way, Darius was kind of like, heck no, and he kind of dethroned him and took the throne. So Darius is he was looked at as this guy who is good, but maybe he actually killed the heir to the throne and called him an impostor to the heir to the throne. But he did a lot of good things for the empire. And he appointed, so he standardized the satrapies. He appointed 20 governors, and he did a lot of legal, economic things like building roads and building a lot of construction projects, as I like to say it. He made Aramaic the official language, very cool, and implemented a currency which never had been mass sort of done before. Also, the peak of the Persian Empire, and you'll get this map as this is the accurate to this time. And when he was king, though, we know that a lot of kind of revolts happened. That's what these fire represents. The arrows represents attacks. The fire represents the revolts. And this is 522. So this is around the time that our narrative, our decree of Darius takes place. And as you can see, his world is up in flames. He wants to make sure that the people respect him. And so that's maybe an incentive to why he made the decree in chapter 6, is he wants to make sure that they're under control. You can see Babylon is revolting, Egypt's revolting, and these other nations. Darius's religion is kind of important because it's interesting. So he's I don't know if you guys heard about Zoroastrianism. It's a little bit. What do you guys know about it?
I know it's like a religion that is very not dominant, but it's like in Iran's area, kind of. And I know some people
Oh, you cut.
arms, and yeah, I know a little bit about it.
Okay. Are the rest of you guys kind of on the same boat? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There was a lot of like dualism, so like ultimate good, ultimate evil, heaven, hell type stuff. And I definitely remember Elizabeth getting excited about fire rituals.
Oh, very cool. Yes, so it's people sometimes argue that it's a monotheistic religion. It does acknowledge other gods, but it says that this other god, Ahura Mazda, is a god above the others. And you'll hear an argument that. You laughing at my pronunciation, Simon? Yes?
It just sounds like a really bad insult.
Ahura Mazda?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I pronouncing it right?
You look like Ahura Mazda.
Ahura Mazda? All right, I'm just going to go with it. Yes. So one god above the others. It started in the 6th century BC by this Zoroaster guy, and he basically got a vision, and he promised immortality and bliss to their followers. This wasn't widespread, though. A lot of people think it's widespread. It wasn't. I don't know. Yeah, so it wasn't standardized until about 200 AD. So it's not a big thing, but you have Darius, who's a really strong believer in it, and I'll show you the inscription that he has. But yeah, he's. I keep on thinking it's a girl. He's described as a lot of like very Yahweh-like things, all wise, undeceiving, no one else apart from him, changeless. And good and evil, here's the thing you said about dualism, Kelly, good and evil fight a constant battle. And so there's 100 names for Ahura Mazda. You can look it up. And I just took a couple of them because I thought, man, that sounds like God. That sounds like Yahweh. The creator of all stars, the just creator, the redeemer, the savior. Like, it's very much on the same page. And you can make the argument that maybe Darius thought that Yahweh was Ahura Mazda. Maybe he calls Yahweh God of heaven. So it could be argued either way. But he has this one inscription where he says he kind of attributes all of his whole reign to Ahura Mazda, and he says, "By the grace of Ahura Mazda, I'm king." And he goes on to talk about how great Ahura Mazda is. And here you have this is an inscription. This is Darius. This is some of his servants, and this is all his captures. Here's Ahura Mazda. And the cool thing about this inscription is it's the same thing written in 3 languages. It's called the Belishtan inscription. It's in Iran. And it's written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. And this is the reason why we can translate cuneiform. So it's kind of like the Rosetta Stone of the ancient Near East languages. Yeah. Okay. I guess we're nearing the hour. We could, should we take another break here, halfway through the book? Nice.
Okay, Joseph, you can start whenever you want.
Okay. I'll get started. So, oh wow, everyone's so quiet. I just feel so alone as soon as everyone mutes themselves. Okay, so as you guys know, so I think I hopefully solved the internet issues. Let me know if it still persists. I couldn't see the chat, so if you try to let me know by chat, I couldn't see it this whole time. Yeah. All right, let's get into it. Okay, I'm a little bit thrown off because I now have my notes printed out, and they were right here before, but I should get used to it. So chapter 5. Okay. Two prophets get added into the mix, Haggai and Zechariah, which is very fun. You'll learn more about them before or later. Maybe from Michael soon enough. This is basically, chapter 5 is basically, the second half of chapter 5 is Judah from the Persian perspective. So you get what like the satrapy thinks of Judah, and you get this guy named Tattenai appears, and he's a real character. Can I? Oh yes, Michael. I'll quickly talk about Tattenai. He's a real character. He appears in like cuneiform scrolls. So he took this position from 500 of about 528 or BC, and so as we introduce these new sort of characters, I wanted Michael to give a little brief. I thought it was fitting for him to give a brief kind of introduction to who this person is.
Well, that's exciting. Thanks, Joseph. Haggai is a prophet from the returned exiles to Judah, and I'm really excited to teach you guys about him. He is called by God to push the people to rebuild the temple, and that's pretty much his one goal. So, yeah, he's a cool guy. I don't know what else you would like for me to say. Judah, yeah. Is that everything, Joseph?
That's good. Okay. Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool.
Yeah, that's him. And then there's this. This is kind of what I summarized. Pretty much what Michael was saying. He kind of encourages the people to rebuild the house of the Lord. And you have. I don't know if Elizabeth, you remember anything about Zechariah, but I figured you'd be the perfect person to share about who he is and what his message is.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. I'm not teaching Zechariah, but I would be happy to give a few words. Zechariah is quite a memorable prophet. If you thought Ezekiel was confusing, just get ready for Zechariah. He's a whole new level of whack. But he was a contemporary of Haggai and also encouraged building on the temple, but he also had a lot to say specifically about leadership. And so at some points he prophesies directly to Zerubbabel and Joshua. And he has just some other like eschatological type visions, like the day of the Lord. It's whack. You'll see it. It's great. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate summary to what I have written here. Yeah. So again, this Tatlina Simon died. So 520 to 502 BC, and he's the satrapy of the province beyond the river, which is all of Syria. So Judah, Samaria, and everything else. Okay. I found it interesting that Tattenai, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He seems to admit that the Jews are prospering, which is like a unique thing to do if you're, I guess, against him. His kind of incentive is he wants to protect his own wealth here, and he wants to protect his. It might be a little bit defensive. Maybe he actually believes the Jews are attacking him. Maybe he's we don't really know. Maybe he just doesn't want to, like, maybe they have like these tax breaks he doesn't like. But and then the Jews have an excellent understanding of why they're here. They say, but our fathers have angered the God of heaven, and he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. They realize that it's their fault. They're taking accountability for their own actions. Which you'll see is something that Ezra does a little bit later on as well. That's what I have to say on chapter 5. It's it's something that you'll read about a little bit more, maybe doing the BRI for Haggai and Zechariah. So in chapter 6, we get Darius's response, and it takes a while to search for the scroll, and we find that actually Cyrus lived in Ecbatana for the first couple of years of his reign, so that's why the scroll was there. And you see this shift from what Cyrus says about who God is. Darius uses just the God of heaven, standard term, nothing personal, nothing unique. And here's something I already kind of suggested to before. And then Tatanay's reward is that he, for accusing the Jews, is that he has to pay the cost himself. So it's coming out of his own treasury here. Yeah, I wouldn't be super stoked about that. The plan backfires him. Something cool about the prophets. Oh, I guess we're talking about this. Okay, so Josephus says that even after this threat, it didn't really work as the Jews continued to obstruct the temple and not supply their needs. Take that as you will. Okay, these prophets, some of the most effective prophets ever. Notice how they don't die, they aren't killed, and they actually are effective. It says that the Jews prospered during the times of Haggai and Zechariah, which is pretty unique among prophets. Okay, yeah, so I think, and Darius is interesting because he actually gives the dimensions of the temple, and you only hear about it here, but he says that this is what the dimensions are, and sort of it talks about Cyrus's commandments for the dimensions, and allows us to compare the temples with each other. So Solomon's temple, we get from Chronicles, is 60 cubits long by 20 by 120, and the 20 cubits long, there's like these sort of vesicles at the side that add to it, which aren't included in this. And neither is the courtyards around it. And of course, it is adorned like crazy. Read chapter 4 of Second Chronicles, or chapter 3, and you get these descriptions of what the temple is like. And you'll notice that in this storyline, there's none of that, because I don't think they're proud of it. I don't think it is anything to be compared with this. This is an incredible. This is the golden age. This is just a wonderful temple. 400 golden pomegranates. Everything's just overlined with pure gold, and they have these massive cherubim that I don't think I have on my slide that are also covered in gold. And the whole house is just overlain with beautiful stones. Ezekiel's temple is a cube, and you have those images of just like the square in the sky. Classic. It's 100 by 100 by 100. So it's actually not as tall as Solomon's temple, interestingly enough, but it is wider and longer. And of course, the courtyard is 500 cubits by 500 cubits, so it really dwarfs Solomon's temple. Maybe you guys have looked at that a little bit when you're doing Ezekiel. You probably have. And then Ezra's temple is actually also a cube. And it's actually pretty comparable to Solomon's temple. It's actually, they're probably about the same length. Maybe it might be a little bit wider, but it's only about half as tall. But pretty comparable in terms of dimensions. It probably stood on the same ground, which is why it would have been similar sort of length and width. But of course, height, it doesn't matter as much how high you make it. So probably because of their lack of resources, they didn't make it as tall. But I think the main difference between the temples is that this one, it's half as high, and it also just doesn't have all the gadgets and the bells and whistles that Solomon's temple might have. Yeah.
Hey, Joseph, I have a question here.
Yep, go ahead.
These people had already known about Ezekiel, right? Like he was a prophet, and while they were like in exile and all that, they were like, these people were the original audience, maybe original readers somehow. So why when they come back they decide to build their own kind of temple? Like we just saw like the different measures. Like one is like 100 cubits, and this one is like 60 cubits.
Yeah.
So you think they didn't just like care about Ezekiel, or like I don't know, like if I were them and I had just read Ezekiel, me as an original reader, I would be, hey, let's build Ezekiel's temple. But seems to me like there is something here that is not connecting between these people, or maybe they were not reading Ezekiel, maybe they were not reading the scripture. I don't know. Well, what do you think? What was happening here?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I it's hard to like it doesn't there's no reference to Ezekiel in Ezra, so it's you could argue that they haven't read Ezekiel. But if you look at verse is it 3 there, like Cyrus says, let the house be rebuilt and let its foundations be, and then he gives the foundations of the temple. So Cyrus here tells the Jews what the foundation, what the size of the temple can be. And so like from a Jew's perspective, like you can either go like, okay, Cyrus is giving us money for this size of a temple. Can we build it twice as big? Like, so, or it's even bigger, including the courtyard. So, like they probably just didn't have the resources to build the temple that Ezekiel imagined. So I think the question they would be asking is, should we go ahead with building the temple that we've been allowed to build, or or do we wait until we have enough resources to build something that we think God has told us to build? So it's more of a question of is any temple better than no temple? And I would probably go for the temple, but at least that's my interpretation of what happened.
Okay, thanks. And that leads me to another question. Like you mentioned, like the fire in Leviticus, like it was God, and when Solomon built the temple, the presence of God was there, and now this time, God, like he didn't show up. Like they throw this party, like this great thing, and God doesn't show up. Is it like you think God was against it, or he was okay with it, but he just had another plans, or like, I mean, I don't know. What do you think was God doing there with not showing up or with not sending fire and all these things?
Yeah, that's something that you're gonna talk about in Haggai. There's a big encouragement to build the temple, and it's a repeated theme. I don't want to spoil this too much, but there's a repeated theme of God is with God says I'm with you, and you like build this temple. I'm with you. My hand is on you, and so I think it definitely was a struggle for the Jews to think about is God actually with us, and how do we know that He's with us? And I think it was a big challenge. I think that's probably actually one of the biggest challenges in this book, was sort of wrestling with that fact. Does that help? Sweet.
Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, thanks.
And we're gonna sort of, that's kind of the theme for the rest of the book, for me at least, is this question that I think you've sort of already started to touch on, but that's something that we're going to do at least for this next couple of slides, as we sort of compare the dedications between the temples. So you have the Ezra dedication at the end of chapter 6. The temple's finished and dedicated, and we know what happens in the Old Testament with the other dedications, and we're going to get some people to share that. So this is the one, Exodus. I believe we have Kelly reading this one.
Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle.
Yeah. So similar to the altar in Leviticus, God comes down, or the fire comes down and lights the altar. And in this one, we get the glory of God, the presence of God filling the tabernacle. And spoiler alert, the presence of God does not happen in Ezra. And yeah, there's a couple of things I want you guys to pick up on, and is that Moses can't enter the tent of meeting. There's a sort of this actual sort of something that you can't do, a physical sign of the presence of God in Exodus. And then we get the one in Chronicles, which is a little bit longer. Who's on that? Alex, I believe.
Yeah, okay. As soon as Solomon finished his prayer, fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. And the priests could not enter the house of the Lord because the glory of the Lord filled the Lord's house. When all the people of Israel saw the fire come down and the glory of the Lord on the temple, they bowed down with their faces to the ground on the pavement and worshipped and gave thanks to the Lord, saying, "For he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever." Then the king and all the people offered sacrifice before the Lord. King Solomon offered as a sacrifice 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep.
Sweet. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. So again, the same things kind of happen as the last time. The glory of the Lord fills the temple. The physical sign, the priest cannot enter the temple of the Lord. It's repeated twice again as in Exodus. That thing in blue, do you guys recognize it from anywhere? Yes, I see noddings. Yeah, it's the same thing from chapter 3. And interestingly enough, this sort of phrase, it's a little bit different in chapter 3. It says for Israel or to Israel. But it's only repeated a couple times in the historical narrative. It's David says it when the tabernacle, no, the Ark of the Covenant is brought to Jerusalem. He says this line. It's said in Psalms, but it's like only said in Chronicles. So you have this sort of comparison of the Israelites are saying, "For he is good and his steadfast love endures forever," when they're at the prime, and they're also saying it when God doesn't come and God's presence doesn't enter the tabernacle. And yeah, you can really see this throughout just how they're saying they're echoing the same words as their forefathers before them. And then we get one from Ezekiel. Elizabeth, I think you're on that one.
And behold, the glory of the God of Israel was coming from the east. And the sound of his coming was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone with his glory. And I fell on my face. As the glory of the Lord entered the temple by the gate facing east, the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court. And behold, the glory of the Lord filled the temple.
Yeah. So again, glory of the Lord is there twice. And Ezra, let's see what happens in this story. Noemi.
And the people of Israel, the priests and the Levites, and the rest of the returned exiles celebrated the dedication of this house of God with joy. They offered at the dedication of this house of God 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, according to the number of the tribes of Israel.
Yeah. So I had like red for the other one, symbolizing the presence of God, yellow for like if they could enter the temple, and here and green for the offerings. And here they can't do any of they can't do anything that they did before. I made a little graph of everything that they sort of a comparison between the temple, and you see the glory of God. This is the first time the glory of God has not come down, and they like historically, God has come. Historically, they've been unable to enter the temple, and the only thing they can do is they can sacrifice God and they can worship God. But even their worship is nothing compared to what it was before. In Corinthians, actually, Chronicles, it goes into detail about their worship and how cool it was and how long it was and their feast. And here you get a complete just giving up of, we don't have this, we don't have the presence of God. We don't have, it's like, and there's no explanation for it. Ezekiel's vision seems to imply that God's presence will come again. Why didn't it come again? Isn't this actually a sign that God is not with them? That there's no presence? It's definitely something that they'd be challenged with. So let's, okay, I'm going to try to get through the rest in 10 minutes. So Assyria is mentioned in 622, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about it because Assyria, they are a satrapy of Persia, although there's a couple of differences for Assyria. It's described as Dehu, which means it's sort of interpreted as their own individual group without political administrative implications. So Persia wouldn't really be involved as much in Assyria as they were before. So Assyria could choose their own king. They were pretty much separate from Persia besides the fact that they paid taxes. So it would make sense to call them the king of Assyria. In this place, it was not super uncommon, or it wouldn't be like, it's not weird. And from this is kind of a sketchy source. It's like a Greek person 100 years later, but he said, they're really wealthy. There's really fertile land. And so they would have been rich. And it's kind of a cool thing because this Assyrian king historically took over them and was really against them, but now they're helping them. So this is something that is like a relief for them and something that they praise God for in verse 22. Xerxes, I'll go really fast over. You'll talk more about him in Ezra, but he's also called Ahasuerus. And he's known for a couple of things. He's known for his massive building projects. Not a good friend of Babylon. He subjugated the city. He melted down Marduk. Not a good look for him. And in return, he also made this massive campaign on Greece, which is the largest one ever recorded at this point. And 4 years preparing. And this is kind of what he did. Attack, and then Babylon, there's a revolt in Babylon, and one in Egypt during these dates. So Babylon not happy, neither was Egypt. Okay, Artaxerxes is the king in Nehemiah as well. Oh, the sun's rising. Isn't that crazy? Good morning. Artaxerxes is the king, and during this time. And so he continued the wars with Greece, although he used a little bit of a different strategy. He started using bribery and tactics as opposed to open war. He would bribe the Greek officials to kind of sabotaging them. And but he made peace with them that lasted for 100 years, just after the walls were completed. He did more building projects, and there was a revolt in Egypt right around the time that Ezra and Nehemiah would have been sent. So it makes sense, his actions. And this is what kind of happened. The arrows symbolize bribery and the revolt in Egypt. The revolt in Egypt was a big deal because it lasted 10 years, or 6 years, lasted half a decade. The revolt was, Greece sort of supported them, so they would send people in to help the revolt. They really encouraged it. Moving on to chapter 7. Teaching was really important at this time. As I mentioned before, it seems like Israel kind of in disrepair with people living far away from the temple. And so like the temple was kind of neglected. That's why this chapter focuses so much on on the Israelites and the Levites. And Ezra has this incredible favor with God, as you see so many people in the biblical narrative living in other nations have, which I think is really cool. Is you have like Daniel, Joseph, Ezra, Nehemiah, just favor in the countries of their captors. Not everyone was able to give this up, and you have like people like Daniel. Like, why didn't Daniel come back? Something to think about. He could have. He's in incredible favor with God. Maybe he was really old. Maybe that's why. And the journey took 4 months. The hard to study the law, which I think is something that I don't really want to take this away from you guys, but I think this is something to, as a student in SBS, this is something to think about. Is this sort of line of Ezra's heart and what you guys should be doing as studiers of the law. Artaxerxes kind of has this plan to fundraise for. Is that sun getting annoying? I might put the blinds down, or I might just continue to slowly move. Artaxerxes has this plan to support by getting the Jews across Babylon to support, or to give money, kind of tithe, kind of like missionary support to the people in Jerusalem, and so they don't actually have to physically go down to Judah to sort of support them. They can stay in their rich chic houses. So in chapter 8, Ezra kind of begins this journey from Babylon, and he ends up only making it part way. And the scholars think in verse 15 it says, "I gathered them at the river that runs to Ahava." Scholars think this is hit Iraq. So on Google Maps, that would have taken 49 to 46 hours, depending on his route. It kind of just gives you a general estimate of where it is. This sort of road right here, this is the Euphrates, I believe. It doesn't show it on the map, but he would have been walking along the Euphrates, and his goal would be to kind of loop around here without having to go through this desert. And God listened. Ezra ends up asking for help, and he ends up saying God listened to him, but he doesn't really show, he doesn't have proof to how God listened to him. And I think that's kind of cool, is that he knows that God listened to him because of who he understood God to be. And he knew that God will listen whenever you ask him. And you don't need proof of God listening to know that God listened. And yeah, that's all I want to say on that. This is something I've been meditating on the last couple of days, and I don't think I've fully sort of realized what this verse means. But he calls the Levites, and he says, "Guard these sacrifices, because you are holy to the Lord, and the vessels are holy." And I think there's something cool about Ezra giving worth to their jobs as he's giving worth to the people that are doing the jobs. And I think it's really important as Christians to do the same thing, is to make sure that as we're sending people off, and as we're maybe employing people or telling people to do things, that we don't just say how important their job is, but we say how important they are as a people. And he's echoing Deuteronomy 14:20, "For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples that are on the face of the earth." And then Ezra in verse 26 weighs the offerings, and he does this now so that when he gets to Jerusalem, he can re-weigh it. It's just a way of accountability so that they know what happened to all the gold. Okay. A little sidetracked. I got a little sidetracked. In verse 35, they offered 12 goats, which they offered already. I don't know if you caught it, but in verse chapter 6:17, they've only ever offered 12 goats in Numbers, and each tribe of Israel offered 12 goats. There's no law for why 12 male goats need to be offered, but they do it. So yeah. If you're interested, I encourage you to look up that verse reference. Why? I don't know. Yeah, just a little refresher on the Levites and their jobs, as taken from Numbers and Chronicles. So their jobs, you guys probably already know all of this, but just in case you've forgotten, it's Levites are mentioned so often in this book that I think it's good, a little bit of a refresher. But they're basically just helpers of the priests. So they guard the priests, they guard the congregation, they guard and their job was to transport parts of the tabernacle, but that wasn't really needed once they got the temple. And then they're just to help out the priests, so they're kind of just aides, and to worship God every morning, which is really cool. And the Levites, again, are dedicated to the Lord because the Lord saved all the firstborn of Israel during their Passover in Egypt. So they're saved, and then the Levites are then dedicated towards them. Chapter 9. Okay, I think... Oh, okay. One thing I want to mention, I just think it's really kind of fun, is in chapter 7, verse 21. I'm just going to read it. And I, Artaxerxes the king, made a decree to all the treasurers in the province beyond the river. Whatever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law, the God of heaven, requires of you, let it be done in all diligence. This sentence has all the letters of the English alphabet except for the letter J. There you have it. You can count it. I dare you. Chapter 9. Okay. So the officials approach Ezra. They must have had some sort of knowledge of the law in order to approach him. So Ezra implies that Ezra's job is, he might have already started teaching, or maybe the officials already knew the law from tradition. But they approach him, and they sort of been like, hey, there's something up with this with the Levites. They're marrying off random people. Yeah. So, and then what happens is that you have the people that come were the ones who took God seriously. They say trembled at the words of God, and I think trembled is a really cool word because it kind of challenges me, because I often think that I take God's law like sometimes lightly, and here they're described as trembling at the words of God. That's something that like I aspire to do, is like just tremble at his words. Yeah, and Ezra is in distress. He says that for a brief moment favor has been shown. I would argue that favor has been shown like quite often, but I understand what he means. He doesn't want to lose what he's had. And I think that's sort of what Ezra is coming at this book with, is he's coming at from an approach of I have so much, and I don't want to lose it. And God has been with us so much, and I know what's going to happen because I've seen it so many times throughout history. What's going to happen is that, we're going to fall into sin like we always have before. We're going to start worshiping the other nations' gods, and we're gonna get everything that we've gotten back taken away from us. So this is Deuteronomy. I think I had Michael reading this one. If you could read that, that'd be great, Michael.
When the Lord your God clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, you shall not intermarry with them, giving away your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly.
I just realized that there's two Michaels in this call. So Michael Manwaring, if you want to read the Jeremiah, I'll just call on you for that one. Something you should notice is that in Deuteronomy, so they're commanded not to intermarry with, and here's a list of the people they should intermarry. This list is then repeated in Ezra 9, 1 or 2, 1. Yeah. So, and it's clear that like at this point, probably not all these nations live there still. They would have likely at this point, things have happened to them since Deuteronomy. So what the officials were trying to do is they're not trying to, or the author of this book is they're not trying to show. They're trying to say that these same people that were living in these nations are before. They're saying the same type of people are now what we're falling into. Not the exact same kinds of people, but the same. They worship other nations. They're pagan beliefs. They're really trying to drive the connection between what was happening in the past. Yeah, that's what I want to say about that. Chapter 10. All right. Oh, perfect. We have 15 minutes. Okay. So Ezra, in a fit of rage, or he's not a fit of rage, he's spent time fasting and praying and weeping, and he's kind of been like, come here in 3 days, or all your property is forfeited. And I don't know if he can do this. I mean, property is also very in Judah. It's all assigned. You've read through Joshua. You know the assigning of property is very important. It takes up like half the book. It's a very important thing for them. Land is very important, as I mentioned before. So this is a very extreme, and I think Ezra knew that it was extreme. And sort of my question for these two chapters is I don't know if what Ezra did was right, and it's hard to know, I think. But my question is like, what is better, an overreaction or an underreaction? And especially to sin, and you see this play out kind of among the biblical narrative. You have the first half of Israelites' history has been an underreaction to sin. You have, go through Chronicles and see the kings who have, followed God maybe, but they haven't taken down the high places or the altars. And you see Ezra just completely contrast that. For better, for worse, he has done an overreaction to sin. And he created this, he's causing mass divorce, He realizes the weight of sin and what it can do and what it can harm, and he needs to go against that. And what happens is that you end up finding out what happens to the Jews is they end up having this super legalistic approach to the law, and you get Pharisees who study the law only to find out what they can and can't do. They have this sort of we're not going to follow the heart of the law, but the words of the law sort of mantra, and it's a major problem. So I don't know what I would have done in this situation, but I think it's important to consider both sides when in sort of thinking about this, is realizing that he could have, what would he done if he let those marriages stay? Like, they would have started worshiping other gods. Potentially they would have then fallen right back into the same old patterns. And the Jews want to go home. The Jews are like, no, it's raining. This is not. I can't just immediately divorce my wife. Like, this is not how it works. And I think it's important that sin can't be solved in a day. It's not all going to happen all at once, and it ends up taking months to solve this, and it debatably isn't even solved. But yeah. And the book ends with this really long list of everyone who's sinned. And genealogies are important in this book, and lists are important, and this is one of the worst lists to be on. I mean, it's less sort of like, yeah, I like couldn't contain myself. I know the Bible, but I've fallen short of it. It's especially the priests at the start of that. You have these people are not allowed to. They have extra strict rules on who to marry, and there they are now etched into these pages for eternity. Just imagine like your sons. Oh, that's my dad on that list. And the book ends in in the worst, in sort of the saddest possible way, that even foreign women who had children, they were split off. There's no sympathy. There's no exceptions in this new sort of rule, this new law. It's the law is the law, and yeah, kind of what happened. I think it is important to note, though, this really good quote by Bright, whoever he is. But he kind of is basically, I'll read it. I have a bit of time. When one considers the magnitude of the calamity that overtook her, one marvels that Israel was not sucked down into the vortex of history along with the other little nations of Western Asia to forever lose her identity as a people. And if one asks why she was not, the answer surely lies in her faith. The faith that called her into being in the first place proves sufficient even for this. Yet this answer is not to be given to the utmost, but that it won through not something that was transpired automatically, but only by much heart searching and after profound readjustment. And yeah, it sucks because there's often sacrifices that must be made, but there's so many cultures that lost their religion during these kind of events and during these assimilations, and Judah is not one of them. They managed to keep theirs strong, and I think a lot of that is because of Ezra's strictness to the law. And I don't think that's good. I don't think that's right, but I mean it's just kind of what happened, and that's too bad. And here's another meme. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
At the and again 10:15 it says only Jonathan the son of Ezra opposed this.
Mm-hmm.
I supported them. So people that rebelled, or
Sorry, what was that?
because of the verse like 10:15.
Yeah.
It that some people like opposed this. What it about? Did they not accept what was asked of them, or?
Yeah, you cut out there for again, but what you're asking is why they opposed it, or
No, yeah. So did the people oppose to the fact that they had to put their wives away or to divorce them?
yeah. So Jonathan and Jahaziah opposed this sort of law, like going back to your own cities and sort of taking your time to divorce your wives. It doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. It's not super clear what they opposed. Like maybe they opposed the whole thing. Maybe they thought it should be done in a day. But it's important because, I mean, they're written in this book as sort of just to show that they did it. That if they were considered in a bad light, they did it. They're written so that people know what they did. It's kind of a testament of who they are. I don't really have a good answer for that. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So as I was going through this book, I was really connecting with like other prophecies about this time, specifically, I mean, in the prophets. And And I was really sort of realizing that maybe the Jews thought this was kind of like what, those you have to like color code the prophets, and you color code them like a different color for like judgment, restoration, the other one. And like, what would the Jews have thought that this was going to be the restoration? Like, I colored it orange, so was it going to be like the orange section of my prophet's book? And I kind of think that they probably did. And I'm going to share. I have a couple of quotes that I want to kind of think about. And I chose trees for the theme of this because I think trees have like so much potential, and the dead trees in particular. And you have a tree and it could have lots of life or it could be dead. And I think maybe they sort of symbolically thought that they were a dead tree during this time. I think, Michael, you're on this.
All right. Again I will build you, and you shall be built, O Virgin Israel. Again you shall adorn yourself with tambourines, and shall go forth in dance of the merrymakers. Again I will build you, and you shall be built, O Virgin Israel. Again you shall adorn yourself with tambourines, and shall go forth in dance of the merrymakers. Again you shall plant vineyards on the mountains of Samaria. The planters shall plant, and they shall enjoy the fruit.
Yeah, so this is kind of just a talking about how prosperous and how much joy they will have, and whether or not it happened at this moment or not, I think it's debatable. Here's another one. Michael, you're up again.
I will bring them back to this place, and I will make them dwell in safety. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. I will give them one heart and one way, that they may fear me forever, for their own good and for the good of their children after them. I will make with them an everlasting covenant, that I will not turn away from doing good to them. And I will put the fear of me in their hearts, that they may not turn from me. I will rejoice in doing them good, and I will plant them in this land in fruitfulness, with all my heart and all my soul. For thus says the Lord, just as I have brought all this great disaster upon this people, so I will bring upon them all the good that I promised them.
Yeah, so this one, I mean, it's crazy because God doesn't say anything about there being sufferings and persecution and his presence not coming. He's talking about all the good that he's going to do. And there certainly is good that he does, but there's like also a lot of pain, and there's a lot of work, and a lot of it's not easy. And yeah, Daniel, I think, is gonna be the last one for today. Who's reading?
And in the days of those kings of the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
Yeah. So the question has to be asked, like, why isn't it this kingdom? Why can't God make this kingdom now? I think the Jews would have been like, okay, this is our time. This is our time to make a kingdom that won't be broken. This is the time to fulfill the promises that we've waited so long for. And then you get the narrative, the truth. And the truth is that you have a temple without the presence of God. You have an altar that was lit by human hands, and you get constant persecution by the nations around them. And you have all of these promises, they sacrificed so much to get here. They gave up their wealth, and yet they're sitting here, and God is not delivering the way they expected them to. And for me personally, I've sort of had to wrestle with what happens when God does something that you're not expecting. What happens when God works in a way that you don't necessarily want, or think that you need. And yeah, I mean, personally, I've just moved to like a new city. I just in the last 4 months, and I've had all these expectations of, oh, I'm going to meet new friends. I'm going to have like all these great experiences, and COVID restrictions have gotten worse. I've like not been able to meet with anyone, and like even the times when I found ways to like do things, sometimes they've like my friends have like bailed out. And so the question I've faced with is like, God, why aren't you providing with the people that I've wanted? Why aren't you giving me sort of this experience that I wanted? And I think that something that has really struck me is how Ezra, or the author of Ezra, has constantly been pushing on the people since day one. And I haven't really touched on it because I want to touch on it now. But Ezra's response is constant throughout the book, and he responds. I mean, I talked about this a little bit, but they talked about how good God is and how much He loves them, and the repeated theme throughout this book is that God was with the people. It's said so many times. The eye of the God was on the elders of the Jews. The hand of God was on them. The hand of the Lord was on me. Throughout a time when the Jews would be facing such like a time of insecurity and not knowing if God was with them or not, Ezra again and again and again says, no, God is with us. God is with us. Look here, God is with us. And I think that was kind of my main takeaway, is that even in this time of even through incredible just disappointment, God is with you. And I like, if you need more confirmation, you'll find out in Haggai that God declares Himself. I'm with you, declares the Lord. I'm with you. And Haggai's only like a page long, Yeah, so I think this is an important thing to. Oh, I just saw Elizabeth's chat. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think that's kind of what I got out of this book, and that's what I have for today. Thanks, guys.
Joseph, great job. We are so proud of you. I'm thankful so much that you did this. And it's great to be able to do Haggai now, because I'm like, oh, we're just tag teaming this week. It's great. I love it. Yeah, so let's spend some time, maybe just two people give encouragement to Joseph, and then we'll move into praying for you, Joseph, and then we'll let you go. Two people.
I know how to unmute. Yeah, Joseph, I feel like you just put so much like heart into preparing this, and yeah, I think you did really well with like all of your visuals, and even like putting the kings in like as the story went. Like that was super helpful for me, particularly because I draw a lot of my notes, and so that was really helpful to like be able to like connect the different things, and as well as like the maps and stuff, because like I don't know, I know a little bit about Persia and Greece, and like when you're talking about them, I was like, that's the king from 300, like yeah, and like so I thought you did a really, really good job, and I really appreciate how much effort and just detail went into it, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to join Kelly. Your PowerPoint was amazing. Like the effort you put in it, as you said, like the maps, and even like to do the maps yourself, because people said, "Oh, we liked it," and you added some. I think that just like all the information were on it, so it was really easy to follow what you were thing with like not having to type everything. So it was really good. So thank you very much, and yeah, thank you for all the work you put in it.
Yeah, Joseph, you're very, very well prepared. You did it really well. I enjoyed it. The way that you communicate is like very relaxed. You teach like really nice. And now I'm wishing we had one more class with you tomorrow, like to keep going and all that. It was really good. And thanks, Joseph.
Nice. Joseph, we love you. This was so good, and you did really well. And it's so cool to be like, oh, I remember when we were studying this book, and how you've just come so far to be able to now teach and actually go into some really good details and depths into a lot of things, and show some really good insight about this book. And I'm yeah, really proud of you, Joseph. Well, how can we be praying for you, Joseph?
Yeah, I just I don't know. I'd love some more community here in my city, and yeah, our family's moving again, uh, so we'd love prayer for. I know my dad would really love prayer for a house. We haven't been able to find a house, and just yeah, just how we can see God's hand in all of this. I think would be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get one person to pray. How about Simon, you pray? I want Simon to pray for you.
Love to. Jesus, thank you so much for Joseph. Thank you for how you have kept on meeting with him and growing him. Jesus, thank you so much for this clear revelation that you have given to him and taken deep in his heart of your witness in the midst of disappointment and things not being as expected, that you are the God who is with his people, that the good hand of the Lord is upon him as much as it was upon Ezra. Father, I just thank you for your favor upon him, your desire to bring good in his life. And Father, we join with him today in asking for the provision of good community that he can grow in, that he can be blessed by, but also be a blessing to. Father, thank you for what you have put in him and entrusted him with, that he can share with others as he's done today. Father, I just pray for just increased friendship for him, people that are championing him, but also those that he can champion and come alongside. God, we ask for that community for him, and that you just give him eyes to see who to reach out to and who to connect with. Father, I really ask for the leading of your Holy Spirit upon him. And Lord, I just remember a consistent thing, even in when he shared his testimony here a number of months ago about the way that you are so able to direct his paths and his feet and put him exactly in the right place at the right time. I just remember that's such a key theme in his testimony. And Father, I just pray for more of that in his life, and that he would just really sense the leading of you, Holy Spirit, as he walks. That just as Jesus says, like being like the wind, you're not quite sure where it comes from or where it's going, but that it is the same as with those who are led by the Spirit, and that they are where they need to be when they need to be it, and they are guided along, and there's a mystery of God's hand leading them. But Father, we just pray that he would know your hands. And God, we ask as well for provision for him and his family, that you would lead them in getting a house and in that transition process. Father, I pray that there would be a strong sense of finishing well and starting something new well, and that you would help them to do both, by your grace and by the strength that you supply, and by the wisdom that you give. And Jesus, I pray similarly that you would lead them to an amazing house that would be exactly what they are longing for, what they are dreaming for. And we just trust you, Father, as the giver of every good and perfect gift, to bless this family in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Thanks everybody
Well,
for letting me hang out. I appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Join.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you guys are dismissed, so you don't have to be. But if you
Cool.
want to say something, Jim.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much for letting me teach. I was so stoked when I found out that when you guys asked me to teach, I was so excited, and it's been such a good time. So thanks for this. Cool. Yeah, I'll head out now. See you guys. Love you all.
Bye.